My name's Jeffrey. Welcome to Love and Other Arts. I'm here to teach you the mindset to master whatever art you are pursuing, especially the art of loving. And today, as you might be able to guess from the decorations behind me, we are going to start talking about William Blake, and you can be sure there's going to be no shortage of videos about Blake in the future. Today, we're going to talk specifically about two pamphlets that Blake published early in his career. All Religions Are One and There Is No Natural Religion. We're going to start with There Is No Natural Religion, even though it was printed second of the two. So, There Is No Natural Religion is a critique of deism, a philosophy that was becoming very popular in Blake's time and to some degree has continued to this day. So what is deism? Deism is the belief in a God who created the universe but is separate from it, is not involved in it, not worried about if you worship him or have some certain set of beliefs or do some certain actions to worship him, not worried about it. Blake hates this idea, hates it. So he writes this pamphlet to criticize it. And a lot of Blake's lines of his train of thought, for lack of a better word, in this pamphlet is sort of difficult to follow. And so I'm not exactly here to say, yeah, Blake really destroys deism, or Blake actually missed, such and such point, and because I can't quite tell you that. But I can tell you a point that Blake makes in this pamphlet that struck me as extremely powerful the first time I read it, and continues to strike me as very powerful. So that idea is this. From a perception of only three senses or three elements, none could deduce a fourth or fifth. So I think that's pretty clear, but, just to kind of elaborate a little bit, what Blake is saying is that, if we could see, smell, and taste, but didn't have hearing, for instance, we would never deduce that there is such a thing as sound. Or if we couldn't feel, we would never deduce that there's such a thing as texture. And that is wild when you think about that, because the further conclusion from there is that if there are more properties of things that we just don't have senses for, we have no way of knowing that. And the universe becomes a much more complicated thing, something more out of our reach than we realized. And I think that that's very important to keep in mind. I think it brings a certain sense of humility and even a sense of wonder to your thinking, to realize that you only are taking in from the universe the things about it that you're built to take in, and that there could be so much more, and that it's not just mumbo jumbo to say that there could be more to the universe, because it's so incredibly likely. Again, if you just never knew anyone who could see, you wouldn't know light existed. So anyway, I think that's, for me, that's the biggest takeaway point in There Is No Natural Religion. Someone who maybe can follow Blake's thoughts a little better, or who is just more familiar with arguments for and against deism, might get even more out of the text. If you've read it and have some really cool thoughts about it, share those below. I'd love to hear. And so we're going to go ahead and talk now about All Religions Are One. And the argument there is a little more self-explanatory. Blake's going to argue that all religions come from one source, to say the very least. And so his big idea is that every time that a culture, establishes its religion, what happens is someone who's able to get in touch with what Blake calls the poetic genius or the spirit of prophecy is able to basically sort of communicate with God or with whatever's most fundamental in the universe, and then deliver that to the rest of the culture. But the problem is that people are not perfect relayers of information. It's sort of like if 5 people all read a book and then they tell people they know about that book, you're going to get a different experience of that book from each person. And none of those experiences is going to be the actual book. And so Blake is saying that religion is like that too. There is some kind of very true, very fundamental religion, and loads of people throughout history have experienced it and then relate it to other people. But we don't have, unless you're one of those people who's touched it firsthand, we don't have the fundamental thing itself. We have other people's experience of that thing, and it's still valuable, but it's important to know that it's not that fundamental thing. And again, I think this is a beautiful idea, an amazing idea, an idea that makes sense of human history. And so a related point, not the big point like this, but a related point that I had a really powerful experience with today, preparing to make this video, is that Blake says, "No man can think, write, or speak from his heart, but he must intend truth. Thus, all sects of philosophy are from the poetic genius, adapted to the weakness of every individual." And that's sort of like what we were already talking about, but I think here it's getting a little more personal, a little bit to every person, right? Because not every person gets to the level of experiencing that fundamental thing. Like Blake had these visions, right? Like real life visions, and we don't all have that. We don't have that sort of big experience of the divine or the fundamental or whatever. But we all have moments where we feel something powerful, where we feel something that we think is true and that we very sincerely want other people to know it. And a lot of us start making art for that reason. And one thing that happened to me personally is I started making art because I would feel these deep things that I had very sincere beliefs about. But then what would happen is after, some weeks or months or years passed, is I'd look back on art I had made and I would start to say, well, actually that was very silly. It seemed very, very important to me then, and now it just looks sort of ridiculous. And what I realized today, reading Blake, is that when that happens, it's not because the source of inspiration is a bad source. It's because sometimes you're not a well-prepared vessel for that. And so what I ended up doing was I shut the door on inspiration for a long time in my life. I mean, till now, maybe. And anytime that I would, sort of start to write in a very like emotionally intense way, I'd end up, just writing it off as sort of silly and useless. And when I would see other people writing that way, I would be critical of it. And now what I really believe is that that's exactly what we have to lean into, is these sorts of forces that like compel us to make something. And I'm not saying that it won't need some editing from your logic brain later. I'm not saying that whatever you get down in the first draft is, the perfect thing. But keep that door open. Keep letting yourself be inspired like that. And if you do keep looking back later and thinking what I got from that inspiration was silly, then it's not time to shut the door on inspiration. It's time to make a better house for inspiration to come into. It's time to figure out what your weaknesses are that are turning your inspiration ridiculous instead of powerful. And so that's what I'm going to aim to do for the near future. I'm excited to... I've been writing so much lately anyway, and I'm excited to do more writing and to let inspiration flow through me and see what I can accomplish that way. And I hope that you will do the same. I hope you'll decide to check out these Blake pamphlets. They're both very short. You can read both of them in 10 minutes, probably 10 minutes. And maybe the first time you'll think, well, I don't really know what that said, or you'll only really think one or two of the pages really meant much of anything. But if you put it in your back pocket on a revisit, I would almost guarantee eventually you're going to get something. So thanks for watching. It's been a real pleasure. I suspect you'll be hearing from me a lot more.